Welcome back to Vuln Vibes, everyone. We've got another deep dive for you all today.
Mm-hmm.
And this one's pretty crunchy.
Yeah, definitely.
We're looking at a vulnerability in Apache Ignite,
Right.
and this could allow for remote code execution, which is never a good thing.
Never a good thing.
So Apache Ignite, for anyone who might not be super familiar, it's used for high-performance computing. We're talking big systems here.
Yeah, mission critical stuff.
Exactly. So this is definitely something we need to be paying attention to.
Absolutely. This is one of those vulnerabilities that could have some serious consequences.
All right, so let's get down to it. We're talking about CVE 2024-52577, and this one has a CVSS v4 score of 9.5. That's pretty much as high as it gets, right?
It's about as bad as it can get.
So before we jump into the nitty-gritty technical details,
Yeah.
what does a score like that actually mean? Like, what does it actually tell us about the potential impact?
Well, a 9.5 score, it basically tells us two things. First, it means that this vulnerability is probably pretty easy to exploit. And second, if an attacker manages to pull it off, the impact could be really, really bad. We're talking about a full system takeover. Like, they would have complete control.
That's, yeah.
Not good.
Not good at all. So the vulnerability itself is rooted in the way that Apache Ignite handles what's called class serialization filters. And this is specifically for certain Ignite endpoints. Now, I know we've got a pretty tech-savvy audience here, so we don't have to spend too much time on the basics, but maybe you can give us a quick rundown of how this exploit actually works.
Sure. So think of it like this. You know how we use the analogy of packing and unpacking a box to explain serialization?
Right.
Well, imagine it more like a database backup process. You're essentially creating a snapshot of the entire database, the structure, the data, even the code, and then storing it in a file. That's serialization.
Okay, I'm following.
Now, imagine if someone could sneak some bad code into that backup file, and then when you restore the database from that backup, that bad code gets executed too. That's deserialization.
So that's essentially what's happening here.
Yeah, pretty much. The attacker creates a malicious Ignite message. This message has a vulnerable object inside it, and then they send this message to the server. When the server tries to process this message, it's basically unpacking it, and that's when that malicious code gets triggered.
Okay, so this isn't just like some data leaking out. We're talking about full-blown system compromise here. If an attacker successfully exploited this, what could they actually do? What would a fallout look like?
So the advisory very clearly states arbitrary code execution, and that's a pretty big deal. What that really means is that potentially an attacker could steal data, they could disrupt the entire system, they could even completely hijack it and take control. And since we know that Apache Ignite is usually used in critical environments where performance really matters, this could have massive consequences. We could be talking about compromised financial transactions or even critical infrastructure getting crippled.
Yeah, that's pretty scary stuff. So it sounds like knowing which versions of Ignite are vulnerable is it's essential.
Yeah, definitely.
So let's get down to the specifics here. What versions should our listeners be really worried about?
Okay, so this vulnerability, it affects Apache Ignite versions 2.6.0 and earlier, and anything before version 2.17.0.
So if you're running anything older than 2.17.0,
Right.
you need to take action. And knowing this information lets system admins figure out how vulnerable they are and make sure they prioritize patching the right systems.
Exactly.
So speaking of patching, what's the solution here? What do people and organizations actually need to do to fix this and keep their systems secure?
The good news is that the Apache Ignite team, they've already released a fix for this. Version 2.17.0 or any later version will take care of the problem. Patching is the most effective way to close this security hole.
Yeah, couldn't agree more. This is not something you can just put off. If you're running an affected version of Apache Ignite, you need to stop what you're doing and patch this right now.
Yeah, don't wait.
No time to waste.
Definitely not.
Okay, so patching is obviously the most important thing right now. But this vulnerability, it kind of feels like it's part of a bigger problem, do you think? I feel like we keep seeing similar vulnerabilities popping up that stem from insecure serialization.
It definitely feels like a pattern, and it really highlights the challenge of secure serialization. We need to be doing a better job here. It's not going away.
Yeah, and it's interesting because remember the Log4Shell vulnerability from a few years back?
Of course.
That was another great example of how insecure serialization can be a huge security risk.
Absolutely.
And these types of vulnerabilities, they have this ripple effect. They can impact the entire industry.
Yeah.
And the whole open source software thing, it adds another layer of complexity to the problem.
Right.
Because, with open source, we've got this idea of shared responsibility.
Exactly. Open source is great because the code is transparent and it's developed by the community, but that also means that securing it has to be a collaborative effort. Developers need to prioritize security from the very beginning, but it also means that users have to stay up to date on potential vulnerabilities, apply patches, and really get involved in the community so we can all learn from each other and share best practices.
Right, so patching is just the first step. We need everyone involved to build a more secure open source ecosystem.
Absolutely. Everyone has to play their part.
So we covered a lot today, a really serious vulnerability in Apache Ignite, the possibility of complete system takeover, and of course the urgency of patching. But here's what I really want our listeners to take away from this. How can we get better as a security community at dealing with these types of vulnerabilities, especially in the open source world? We're always playing catch up. How do we get ahead of this?
It's a tough question, but I think we need to start by focusing on secure coding practices, making sure that security is baked in from the start, and we need to have better communication and collaboration between developers and security researchers, and we need to make sure that vulnerabilities are disclosed responsibly. It's a big challenge,
Yeah, it is.
but if we all work together, I think we can make real progress.
Couldn't agree more. Well, thank you so much for joining us today and sharing your expertise. This has been really insightful.
It was my pleasure.
And to everyone listening out there, stay vigilant, stay informed, and stay secure.
Stay safe out there.
We'll see you all next time on Go On Vibes.
See you next time.
Bye for now.
Bye, everyone.